Welcome to my space. Let's take 3 deep breaths together, slow everything down, let your body feel that you're right here. Deep breath in. On the exhale, softening your face, your throat, your chest, your belly, your hips, all the way to your feet. Another deep breath in, gathering yourself back from your day, from your people, from your to-do list, from your worries. And on the exhale, slowing down, dropping into a safer, slower space in your body. Last deep breath in, gathering yourself back from the future. You're not there yet. All we have is right now. Drop yourself into this present moment. I am here. Welcome. One of the practices that I teach that's very, very simple in order to help you downregulate or to manage some panic or tension in the body is to tap. And if nothing else, you can just tap right here in the center of your breastbone. If you really feel like you need some extra releasing, these little vibrations are being sent through your tissues, through your fascial system, all through. You can use a gentle fist, and you're tapping down the outside of your arm, tapping back up the inside, and tapping across down the other side of your arm. You don't have to do this in a specific routine. You can tap wherever. You can tap down the sides of your body. Spend a little bit of time at the hip bones. You can bring it back around to that low back, the SI joints, and you can bring that tapping down the sides of the outsides of the legs, all the way down to your ankles. Bring it back up the inside of the legs. You can also tap the head. If you can feel your tension in here, you can tap really gently, bringing it down around to the temples. You can be right here at the forehead. You can bring it down underneath the eyes. Whatever feels good to you, you're kind of going with what feels good to you right here. You can tap on the chin. All of these points are meridian points, but they're also just, you could tap anywhere on your body and it's gonna feel better to you. So you're spending a little bit of time after you're done. Just take a deep breath. Notice if it feels any different. I can feel a buzzy, it feels like life moving through my tissues. That supports your lymph system, that supports getting the tissues to relax a little bit. It might help you feel less anxious. And then take 3 deep breaths at the end of that. You could also just shake it out a little bit or do heel drops if you feel like that works for you. You stand up on your tiptoes and then gently drop down onto your heels, and that sends a vibration through the body as well to release and help you ground, feel yourself in your bones. So play with those, see how it works for you. I'm also going to share today on this video a little bit of my embodiment story. So I prefaced my story, a little bit of my spiritual story, and coming into using my voice in the last personal share that I did on these videos. In this video, I'm going to talk about the relationship to my body, and then how I felt like there was a disconnect that happened and how I had to learn to come back around and bring my spirit, body, mind together because I was living very disconnected parts in different areas of my life. And that is my passion, is to help people blend body, mind, spirit together to actually incarnate their spirit, soul down into body and then bring that through into the world with vibrancy and passion and aliveness, living your present moment life. In my journey of embodiment, I had an interesting journey with it because I have a lot of connection to the physical body because I grew up in Montana and we spent a lot of time outside. My grandparents had a farm, so I spent time riding horses. I was out on the land. We went camping a lot. My grandmothers and my father grew beautiful gardens. My dad would hunt and dress the meat, and then we'd eat it all winter. I was very connected to embodied actions, seasonal actions. I felt connected to natural rhythms of life and death. And I also was very active as a kid and all through actually college. I played sports, basketball and volleyball. I was a musician, so I played trumpet all through college, and I sang from the age 5 all through adulthood. I was connected to the drama and speech program through high school, so I was up on stage and I was being moving through my body. Now that was fantastic. I also had an intimate connection to my orgasmic energy from a very early age, which many children who explore their bodies find. They find the sensations, they find how their body works, and then they enjoy that piece too. So I was that person from a very early age, not connected to sex, not connected to stories around that at all. It was purely connected to the sensations of pleasure in my body. So I had this beautiful connection to embodied space for me. And I had this passion of a spiritual journey. And as I shared in the last video, I, at like age 4, had this intimate connection to the figure of Jesus inside my own mystical realm in this imaginal space. He saved me on a daily basis. I talked to him. I could feel him talking back to me. I had a tiger that protected me and a dragon that was present for me. And so this space was very, very important to me. And I felt very spiritually alive and connected. As I grew, I wanted to stay in connection to, I wanted to grow in connection to spirit, to Jesus, to God, to what I was exposed to. And so the way to do that was to learn the doctrines, to study hard, to read all the things, to be the best spiritual student I could be. I ended up being a leader in the spiritual communities I was in. But the older I would get, the more doctrine was placed on me, and the more teachings around that mystical area. I started to squash this personal, intimate space because maybe I was talking to demons, or maybe these were wrong things that I was experiencing in this mystical spiritual space. And then on this other side, I was experiencing a squashing of all this embodied space that I lived with movement and sensuality and sexuality and connection to the physical body. Because on my spiritual path, we were taught that the body was wicked, the heart was evil, you couldn't trust the heart's desires, the lusts of the flesh were evil, you were supposed to squash them and control them and be on top of them, and they weren't supposed to run your life. So here I was with this incredibly intimate connection to my body and its expressions and feeling very alive inside my body. And then this growing desire to squash all my natural impulses so that I could be perfect and pure. There's one more piece of my embodiment journey that created a lot of disconnect, and that was abuse in my childhood. So my mother came from an abusive home. My father was an abuser, and I have a sexual abuse story that started pretty young. And so I also had this disconnect from embodiment. I was still connected in all of these ways to myself in an embodied way. But as soon as the spiritual teachings came in and the sexual physical abuse started, I became very unsafe in my embodiment in my home and in places of interactions with other people. So my embodiment then became either a performance that felt okay or out in nature by myself. And every other space, I started hiding and disconnecting a little bit. So I end up getting married really young. I have my first baby at 22. I loved birthing. I birthed 4 babies naturally with midwives. One of them I birthed at home. And I say that I would birth 1,000 times over being pregnant. Pregnancy was not my thing, but birthing was exhilarating. So again, this deeply embodied experience of enjoying the birthing process was mine. Now, in my spiritual pursuit, I struggled a lot because I couldn't squash all the lusts of the flesh. I felt drawn to them Clearly, I wanted to be an expressive human, and it wasn't really allowed, or it wasn't allowed in the ways that felt natural to me. And then over time, I was probably 25 at the point that I had my first breakdown, and I think that it was because of this disconnect that I had created, or that was created for me to protect myself from this embodied space and this trauma space, and to only think that I could pursue the spiritual space. And at 25, I had just birthed my second child. We were in ministry, and things were supposedly going really well, but I was dying on the inside. All I could feel was depression and anxiety and fear. I wasn't expressing myself through my body anymore. I was trying to control all of my impulses, and all I could feel was this anger and fear. And I hadn't worked through hardly any of my abuse from childhood, so I had a crash. And that in that period of time, I decided I could not teach spiritual paths that were devoid of feeling the things that we were teaching. So, lots of what I was teaching at that point was someday your life is going to be beautiful, and you're going to have peace and joy, and everything's going to be okay, probably when you're dead. But now it's the suffering and enduring and struggle and strife, and that's your, you know, it's your opportunity to prove to God how devoted you are, basically. And when I crashed, I remember being on the kitchen floor. I was 25, two kids. My husband at the time was at work, and I was sobbing, wishing that I could die and experience the love, the joy, the peace, the freedom that was promised for the afterlife, but certainly not promised in this one. And at that point, I scared myself because I had two little kids and I wanted to be present for them, but I also wanted to die. So this was a real crisis moment. And that was the moment I decided I was going to figure out how to feel in this body, in this lifetime, the things that Jesus had promised in scripture: peace, joy, love, kindness, freedom, all these things that were promised if you followed Jesus. So that began the quest to reconnect. It took a very, very long time. I had two more kids. I We lived in Mozambique, Africa, and South Africa for a total of about 18 months. I came back from that experience, another crash, physical crash, and again, another knowing of I am done teaching spirituality like this. And that's actually when I exited Christianity, because I saw so much um, spiritual abuse, actually. That's the bottom line. And then on my journey of embodiment, I was like, okay, I have these four kids. I feel like I wish I could be a monk and go hide in a cave somewhere and be spiritual, but I also don't want to abandon my children for spirituality. And at that point, then I was in this journey of undoing all these doctrines that I had learned, and also asking if there was a spiritual path that involved allowing humanity and spirituality, the divine and the human, to actually coexist in a beautiful way, to be fully human and divine, that I wanted to find it. And then that was part of what led me into studying and looking at Tantra and the goddess paths, the feminine paths, because the feminine is everything. If you think of birth, if you think of the divine essence of a female body carrying life, creating life inside of her, and then birthing it into the world, what is more spiritual or divine or human than that experience? And within my Christianity, feminine, there was no feminine power to be modeled. There was no human that was supposed to be lived fully. And so, what really, really kicked me into the embodiment piece, if none of that was enough, ended up having a car accident that gave me a concussion that took me a year to recover from. And for the first 6 months, I was out and not out, but laid out. I couldn't do things. I couldn't think clearly. I was very much in a process of undoing so that I could be remade. And it was in this period of time that I was connected to a Qigong master and an acupuncturist and a massage therapist and a craniosacral therapist. And with the touch, with the gentle movement, I came back into my body in a way I had never been since being a young adult or a child. And that is when I started really feeling the embodiment of my soul having permission to come through my body and to be myself and be honest about who I am in the world. And then supported by the feminine mysteries and tantric teachings and Taoist teachings. And then ultimately, I was reintroduced to Christian teachings from the mysticism place, from the space of Jesus and Magdalene's teachings, and how Magdalene got cut out of the stories that Jesus and his teachings brought forward. But ultimately, Jesus was a feminine mysteries teacher. I believe he taught them with Mary Magdalene. And I re-landed in my body in a very embodied way after lots and lots and lots of healing and practices and coming back in and undoing and feeling afraid of coming back in and being afraid of like being evil and taking a 2-year course on to become a love sex relationship coach so that I could feel my sexuality as something beautiful and powerful and to support other women finding that as a sense of empowerment and agency. So my embodiment journey is long and involved. These are literally just highlights. I've got tons and tons of story around each one of these experiences and then many, many more. But it is why I became really passionate about adding physical touch into the work that I was doing because I lived way too long and I saw way too many people trying to ignore the body while natural things like PTSD, CPTSD, um, trauma responses, and literal just nervous system regulation was being called evil or you weren't spiritual if you were having panic or anxiety, like all of that was just shuffled aside as your struggle for this earth plane, and someday you'll be better. And when I realized and learned the science behind all these things, when I walked through my own trauma healing, when I was given the tools to learn to downregulate, when I was given permission to use the earth, the water, the sun, the breath, to actually regulate my earthen body. All of me started coming alive, and all of the permission for my soul expression to come through, to not squash it in order to be accepted or spiritual, but to actually say, all of it is spiritual. This whole journey of my soul incarnating and coming through this physical body, the divine and the human together. That's a long story. I will piece those apart later, but thank you for listening. I have a lot of passionate expression around this experience for me, these stories for me, and I'm grateful to share them here. Thank you so much for listening. I hope your embodiment journey is supported, that you can feel your body and permission to experience your emotions, your sensations, your pleasure through your body, to experience a life force flowing through your body into the world in ways that are aligned and alive and supported. And if you need help with that or tools, I would be delighted to assist you in that. But there are many, many, many people who can help you bring soul back into body and live your true self into the world. Thank you for being here. I will be back. I hope you will be too.